Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
And thanks again for joining me here at the back of the range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 7, and that was Mitch Phillips. Check him out at mpvoice.com. As always, we appreciate his support and for lending his voice to the back of the range. We're going to jump into the episode pretty quickly this week, but before we do, you know the drill. You're probably listening through Apple Podcasts right now, but if you have friends that don't have an iPhone and are still trying to find out how to listen to the podcast, send them over to Stitcher or Google Play or Overcast. Also, we are on Instagram. You can find us at the Back of the Range podcast. This is the best place to get the latest info. Preview clips, future guest announcements, it's all going to end up there first. And remember, the home base of the podcast will always be our website, thebackoftherange.com. Finally, you can reach me via email at ben@thebackoftherange.com. In fact, I'm starting to get some requests for shirts and hats and towels, something that has the logo of the podcast on it. But I need some advice on this. What should I get printed up? Shirts, hats, towels? Now, don't be a smartass. I can't send you an M3 driver or a Cameron with the Back of the Range logo printed on it. We're not at that point yet. But seriously, if you have an idea, drop me a line, and you never know, I might just hook you up with something. So with the Winter Olympics just starting up, I started thinking of one of the marquee sports of the games, and that would be hockey. And then I started thinking about this week's episode, and I knew it had to happen. We needed a Canadian, but not just any Canadian. No, we needed a Canadian that played hockey as a kid and then college golf in South Florida that also owns a barbecue restaurant. Thankfully, I know a guy that fits that description. So this week's guest is Scott Kennedy, who hails from the golf-crazed town of Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. Scott's life in and around the game of golf has taken some absolutely ridiculous turns. In fact, I'm having a little trouble trying to cohesively introduce him for this damn episode. What can you say about a guy that's played college golf at Florida Atlantic University, then got into the mergers and acquisitions game in Dubai, then he quit that, came back to the States, found himself owning a nightclub, and now he's the co-owner of Smoke Barbecue in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Well, all I can tell you is that this episode is going to be a little different than the rest. So let's get it going. Scott, welcome to the Back of the Range. How you doing?
I'm great, Ben. Thanks. How are you?
Doing great. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me here at the Back of the Range. So we're just now getting into 2018. How's your game, and where are you playing most of your golf these days?
I recently joined a club for the first time in probably 12 to 15 years. I joined Grand Oaks in Davie. And to be honest with you, I'm playing a lot. I mean, I'm probably practicing more than playing, but I cannot use that as an excuse for bad play.
No, of course not. Before we get into your start in the game, just really quickly, name 3 Canadians that own their own barbecue restaurant. Go.
I can name 3 that are in Canada. I don't know of any outside of that are in the U.S.
Okay, good. Just wanted to clear that one up, just because I figured I'd get you on that one. So,
well, the Canadian hotbed of barbecue. I just wanted to bring it south of the border.
All right, that works. That works. So, you mentioned you joined a club, Grand Oaks in Davie, Florida. That is the site of where Caddyshack was filmed, which I'm sure you're well aware of.
I am.
So before we talk about how you're playing now and your previous experience playing amateur golf, tell me a little bit about how you got into the game in Canada, seeing how, hockey's kind of a big deal there. So how did you get into golf?
Pretty simple. I grew up in a town called Peterborough, Ontario, which is about an hour and a half east of Toronto, kind of between Toronto and Ottawa.
Okay.
Hockey was everything in that town. There was a Ontario Hockey League team, a junior team called the Peterborough Petes, where some of the best NHLers have actually come through. Gretzky actually played one season in Peterborough, and I played as a youngster. back at this time, contact started at approximately, I think it was age 11. And I was a pretty decent player, but I was always much smaller. And as soon as the contact started, I ended up getting cut from the rep team. So
okay.
I, and look, there was no visions of grandeur in playing hockey. I played it because I loved playing it. I had started playing golf quite young. I was somewhere between 7 and 8. My father was a member at a semi-private club called Pinehurst, which was in just outside of Peterborough. We're talking dues of $500 a year. Majority of the members walked. It was on, old farmland owned by the Dixon family. A stereotypical story. I'd go out with Dad and, hit some balls, some old clubs. Look, I really was drawn to it. And, by the time I was old enough to be a member, which was 10, you had to be 10, Mom would basically drop me off at the course and during the summer months, and I'd be there sun up to sun down.
Nice.
So it was.
And there's less people hitting you.
There's what? I'm sorry.
There's less people hitting you than in hockey, so it probably that draw.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my general response is I became a golfer because I wasn't good at any other sport. So it was simple.
Okay. Well, you found something obviously that worked. Now, you made your way down to South Florida to play college golf at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, but tell me how that whole thing happened, because I can't imagine that FAU is, or just about any school in South Florida is recruiting really hard in Canada. I could be wrong, but I'm just guessing there.
Well, I can tell you this, that they weren't, and there were definitely some strong Canadians who were being recruited heavily. I wasn't one of them. Going back to Pinecrest, at the top of the hill around the course around the corner from the golf course, there was a farmhouse owned by John Kindred. And John was a unique fellow who was born just outside of Peterborough. He was I believe he was either the first or the second. Bob Jameson might have been the first Canadian ever to play on a college golf scholarship. He played at Florida State. And when I was 16, 17, I got to know John. He would come up to Canada. At the time, he was a head professional at a private club in Sarasota called Gator Creek. And John would take some time off during the summer. He'd come up, play, and we'd get a chance to play. And, I was playing fairly well, but I wasn't playing a lot of tournaments. I worked during the summer. We're, typical blue collar. And the idea of, traveling all over the province or into the United States to play golf tournaments just, it wasn't feasible. But I knew that I wanted to play college golf. I mean, it was something that, I loved the game. I wanted to pursue the game as a career. At least I thought I did at that point. So John was kind enough to contact the coach at Manatee Community College, which was in Bradenton.
Yep.
And they were going to give me a position on the team, and and I ultimately came down to Manatee. And the year I started, they because of a Title IX issue, they ended up having to fold up shop for the men's golf program. So here I was now down in Sarasota at Manatee, and I just wasn't sure what to do. And the reality was it was probably the best thing that happened, because it gave me a chance to work on my game, become better acclimated to golf in Florida, because there's a huge difference.
What are some of the differences that you experienced playing up in Canada and then coming down? Obviously, there's grasses and things like that. So give an example of that.
There's the obvious ones. The grass is first. I mean, and the grass has changed quite a bit over the years. But back then, you were seeing a lot of Bermuda, and the golf in Canada, there was a lot of Kentucky bluegrass and more denser blades.
Sure.
So just around the greens, it took several months to not look like a complete schmuck around the green, because the Bermuda just, beat you up. Putting was very different. Again, the greens have really improved here. The Tift Eagle and these types of blends, they're not as grainy as it used to be. But, for someone who had not played on it, it wreaked havoc. So that was part of it. The other part was I had hit balls in the wintertime.
Sure.
But for the most part, the clubs, they basically went away. And this is pretty typical of most Canadian golfers. There's some pluses and minuses to that. Obviously, you're recharged and you're ready to go when season comes, but season's pretty short. I kind of fell into that big, big fish, small pond, right? So you start playing down here and you start playing with guys who are, in college down here, or they're finished college and they're turning professional, and just the depth of the fields, just playing some amateur, county stuff or city championships. And it's really a wake up call quickly. And you're like, holy mackerel. And to add to it, and I believe it's still there, Bradenton is home to what was then the Ledbetter Academies. So at that time, you could go out and you could play the city of Bradenton or the city of Sarasota, and you'd have, 15 kids who were all going to play major Division I golf. I remember Trent Leon was one in particular. He ended up at Oklahoma State. Peterborough, Ontario didn't quite have this depth of field.
No, probably not. So you make the move down to Boca Raton, Florida from Canada. What kind of a culture shock was that? Set aside the golf aspect of it, but just, you come down to Sarasota, now you're in Boca. Actually, you could probably speak to the difference between Sarasota and Boca Raton.
Look, I thought Sarasota was, one of the greatest places I'd ever been. I had only been to Florida once before the move. When the transition happened to Florida Atlantic, it was a really unique situation because I was in need of scholarship money, athletic money or academic, either way. And this is in the late 90s, and the Canadian dollar was, 60 cents to the American dollar. You add out-of-state tuition. The costs were just astronomical. So I needed some help. Sure. And Coach Scott Williams at FAU, I talked to him several times on the phone, and, he invited me to come down. And I vividly remember driving down here, and I was, I'd gotten off of the turnpike and was driving down Glades Road in Boca, and it's lined with palm trees. And the grass was manicured perfectly. And again, Sarasota was a wonderful place. Boca to me was like,
different
you
world.
got to be kidding me. This is how people are living.
Yeah. It's a different world.
Yeah. And I'm in my 1992 Chevy Caprice White Classic. Looked like I, took it right out of the police station. So I, not exactly fitting in right away.
So tell me about the team. Any of the guys that you played with? How was your you're a 3-year letter winner for the Owls from 2000 to 2003. Looks like you pretty much played in just about every tournament. So you had a pretty solid 3-year career there with FAU.
So I spent 2 years at Manatee, which meant I actually lost. The clock started on my NCAA. So I only actually had 3 years left when I came to FAU. When I transferred in, the number one player was a fellow named Matthew Anderson, who's a dear friend of mine. He's out of Tampa, plays a lot of the FSGA events, and he's also my USGA Four-Ball partner. Look, we were a middle of the road Division I team with the aspirations of being a top tier D1 program. And looking back at it now, those were the best years. I mean,
Sure.
here you are, you're playing golf every day. The team had a fellow from Norway, Nikolai Syversten, another player from Sweden. We actually had a player from Morocco. You know, it's a melting pot team, for example, and you're just learning. You're playing together. You're traveling together. You know, you have classes together. It honestly is the best experience, bar none. I mean, yeah, would have been great to play at Oklahoma State? Of course, yeah, but it would be a very different experience, I suspect. And I just, you know, I look back at it and you almost regret not appreciating it as much as you should have. And, you know, it's age and maturation, but sometimes you just have to kind of take a step back and really look at it and go, I mean, who's got it better than us?
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're absolutely right. Well, I think a lot of it is, and we've had other people on the podcast talk about this as far as college golf goes, but you really have to find the program and the scenario that matches up with you, and be honest about that. Not everyone's a D1, huge program guy. You know, find something where you're going to be able to play and compete and have fun. And it sounds like that's what you had at FAU.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, that program fit me to a T. I could play. I transferred in. I played every tournament. I never missed a tournament. I qualified for all of them. I believe we won 2 college events as a team. We never sniffed the NCAA regionals, but it doesn't hamper or in any way impact the experience of it.
When you think back to your days in college playing golf with those guys at FAU, give me a story of just an absolute shaking my head. I can't believe we got away with this. I can't believe we did this. Because, before, college is college, and even though golf is a serious thing, we us golfers still like to have a little bit of fun every now and again. So, yeah.
There's no question. I can tell you this.
Okay, yeah. Give me a good one.
I don't, I know that Coach Williams is no longer with FAU, but which is good. So
Okay.
we had gone up to University of West Florida's tournament, and this was in late January, early February, and this is up in the Panhandle. Pensacola,
Florida. Yep, Pensacola. That's a 10-hour drive from here.
It was brutally cold. Now, let's keep this in perspective. Brutally cold for me growing up was minus 20, minus 25. It was like, 35.
Yeah.
So it was a very good field, quite a few Big Ten teams there. And at the time, Illinois was there, and they had a Canadian named James Lepp, who I believe went on to win an NCAA championship. Good player, great player, actually, out of British Columbia. And Coach Smalls, Mike Small, was reluctant to have us play. And I don't know if it was because of the difficulty, the course, the weather, whatever it was, or he wanted to make sure that, look, in all honesty, I'm not sure exactly how the NCAA regionals worked at that time, but strength of schedule was obviously a concern and things like that. He wanted his team to produce, and it was windy and cold. It was, miserable. Well, we were thinking there was going to be a delay. So the night before, myself and a couple of the guys on the team decided we were going to go out on Pensacola Beach and see what this was all about. Now, it's in theory, it seems like a great idea. We went and had a couple of adult cocktails, and we met up with a couple of the other teams, and then the next morning came very, very early, very quickly, and I've done a lot of dumb things, but there's something to be said for trying to play hungover at a 30-degree with 25-mile-an-hour winds, and your coach is just breathing down your neck about what you did the night before. It's funny because we when we were out in Pensacola Beach, we met all these local yokels, and a couple of them ended up showing up at the golf course the next day.
Oh God! Oh no!
Yeah. So, needless to say, they weren't necessarily properly attired for the event.
Oh, great! Oh,
so it was a perfect combination of a big night out and then not even letting the night end. It just kind of continued to drag on into the morning. So.
Oh, well, you're out recruiting. You're out bringing fans to the course. So I think what you're doing is you're trying to grow the game in Pensacola, basically.
Yeah, this was out of the love for the game.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Exactly.
that makes sense. So, so apparently this team was no stranger to antics off of the golf course. What about on the golf course? Any hijinks that I should be aware of?
The team were up at a tournament at Daytona Beach, and we had just gotten in these brand new Ping Hoofer golf bags, and for me they were amazing, right? The logo, and this is one of the great incentives of college golf is carrying a team bag.
Sure.
And the coach at the time was a fellow named John Bullis. He was an Englishman, and very respectful of the game, an excellent player himself. And he had a discussion with us, and he's like, "Boys, listen, don't let anything happen to these bags, all right? Carry them with pride, make sure they look nice, yada, yada, yada." So we're playing the practice round, and it's Matt Anderson and Nikolai Syverson and Mike Daly. And, like most college practice rounds, we got a little skin on the game and, maybe $5 or $10. And on the 13th hole, I set my bag down and I go to chip and I flub it. A club goes straight under it. And it was like all in one action. I flubbed it and then turned and swung my club at the bag. And I hit the leg of this brand new bag. I mean, this thing wasn't but 24 hours old. And I dented the leg, and I was oh my God, I was so angry. And, like good teammates, I ratted me out the second I got back to the van.
Of course.
And, coach was, John was like, "Hey, you know what? That stuff happens, don't worry about it." So the next morning's the first round of the tournament, and we're staying on the beach in Daytona, and we go to Denny's to have breakfast. And we're coming back from breakfast, and I go up into the room to grab my clubs. And I go up there, and my clubs are on the bed with no bag. There's a public shopping bag that's got my gloves, my tees, and my balls. And on the bag it says, "I was warned, and now I will be made an example of." And John Bullis made me carry my clubs without a bag for the first round of this event.
Holy shit. Are you serious?
Yeah.
He didn't. You had to carry them by hand, you're just rolling down like you just stole 14 golf clubs out of a Dick's Sporting Goods?
You got it. They're in my hand, in one hand, and then a public shopping bag with this handwritten note in Sharpie with my balls and my bag, or my gloves and my tees in my right hand. And
that's awesome.
Some would say it's excessive, but hey, I've never damaged another bag. That's for sure.
That's outstanding.
Right?
Wow. So FAU, you finish up your career at FAU, and obviously there's that time where I guess you have to kind of think to yourself, all right, am I going to actually play this game professionally, or am I going to go get a job and do my thing? Talk me through how, that decision process came about and where you headed right after school.
So I still had this inkling that I wanted to play golf for a living. And when my eligibility was up, the university allowed me the opportunity to stay on as an assistant coach. And I was finishing up my MBA. Right before graduation in April, I took a student loan out because during the summers I had never had the opportunity to go and play kind of the traditional college summer schedule, playing the North-South or
sure.
the Sunny Hana, whatever it may be. So I took out a small student loan, against, everyone's advice at that point. And I decided, look, I'm going to play for the summer, and I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to have a great experience, and I'm going to see kind of where I match up. At the time, we had another Norwegian on the team named Torstein Neverstead, who was an excellent player.
That's a great
name.
That's
absolutely.
Wow.
And Torstein, eventually, he ended up transferring and finishing at Florida State. Excellent player. Well, I had submitted a ballot entry, and now I believe the ballot entries are based off the World Amateur Golf Rankings, but I submitted a ballot entry to play the British Amateur, and I was fortunate enough to get in. So I went over to Scotland. It was the 250th anniversary of the R&A. It was a huge deal because the tournament was actually at the Old Course. It was on the Old Course and Jubilee Course. And
so let me just make sure I understand this correctly and make sure our listeners are following along here. You took a student loan to finance your amateur golf career and travel expenses. That's
100% right.
Fantastic.
I mean, America's a great country in so many ways, Ben.
Love it. All right. Well, if you needed help spinning that into just calling it an educational experience, I could probably help you with that. But it sounds like you did fine on your own. So I'm sorry. Continue. 250th.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was an educational experience. It just wasn't in the sense of the traditional education.
Those are the best kind. So it's the 250th British Am, you lucky bastard, at the Old Course, you lucky bastard.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
so my caddy, the golf coach that I grew up with in Peterborough, was able to come with me and caddy for me, which was a wonderful experience. A fellow named Mark Crampton. He was instrumental in getting me into a position where I could, play at the collegiate level. And he was able to come over and share it with me. You talk about experiences, and, when we talk about golf experiences, the night before the start of the event, we're invited to the R&A clubhouse. And
of course you are.
Of course, right? So we go into the clubhouse, and they've got this, scotch tasting, and you're able to look, and obviously the claret jugs on site, and it's just, you have to stop and kind of pinch yourself and go, I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, 5 years ago, I'm playing golf in a farmer's field in Peterborough, and here I am at the home of golf, about to compete in the British Amateur, and I'm with, a lifelong friend. I mean, how does it get any better than this?
Yeah.
And every night, when we first got to Scotland, every night we had a pint and a bite to eat at the Dunvegan.
Yep.
Which is owned. Well, it's actually been sold now. But Shira and her husband was a Texan. I believe he was an Aggie. Salt of the earth people.
I think it's Sheena and Jack Willoughby is who you're thinking of.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sheena. I apologize. And she recognized us when we kept coming back, and the night before we went to the R&A clubhouse, we were all dressed up. She came out and she said, "Oh, boys, let me get a picture of you." And so she took a picture of Mark and I, and the next day when we were back in there, she put the picture up on the bar, and it's almost comical because Mr. Palmer was in St. Andrews for the gala for the 250th anniversary, and she had a picture with him from the night before, and then she had a picture of Trip Keeney, who I believe had recently won the U.S. Mid-Am, or at that time was one of the best amateurs in probably in the world. And then there's two schmucks from Peterborough, and there's the three pitchers, and Palmer and Keeney and Kennedy. Obvious, right?
Just rolls off the tongue. I mean, it's just perfect. I mean, that's all you need's a fourth, and you're set.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's really missing? So we end up playing the tournament. I shoot 71 the first round, which was 1 under.
Solid.
And it was windy and a little rainy. And this was the mindset. We're coming off the course and we're making, coming off the 18th and go to the 10th, and then we're making the trek up to the Dunvegan again. And Mark and I were patting each other on the backs. Man, that was a great round. Could have been 69, maybe 68 if you got, everything going. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, can't wait to get out there. And a young fella named Robert Dinwiddie, he was a Englishman who had played on the Walker Cup team. 3 groups behind me shot 62. And
whoops.
Mark and I, literally, we had a pint and a meal, and we're still patting each other on the back. We go back to look at the leaderboard. Hey, let's get a picture. This is the start of something great. Let's get into match play. You don't know where it's going to go. And then we see that number. And if there was ever a time in my life where the light bulb went off and said, holy shit, I mean, you need a job. I mean, that I just didn't have that gear. Some people say to you, oh, you don't know that, you could have got better, or you just had to keep playing through this stuff. But look, I didn't have that mindset. I didn't see 62 out there. I didn't see 67 out there. Look, the mini tour's littered with really great players, but the ones that separate themselves, as obvious as this is, are the ones that can take it deep and aren't afraid to. And that is just, I just couldn't believe it.
Well, I'll tell you what, of all the places to learn that about yourself and your golf game, to learn it in St. Andrews at the home of golf, that's still a pretty cool place to learn it. So you could learn it after getting the shit kicked out of you on like some mini tour in Navarre Beach, Florida, or God knows where. And, you could learn all over the place. But to learn at the British Am, there's no doubt, at least you know it.
100%. I mean, it was really a turning point for me in my life. Although I had other tournaments throughout the summer, I was going to come back and play the North-South and play the Barrett East Coast Amateur and the Canadian Am and stuff like that. It actually freed me up. I knew that I wasn't going to play. I mean, I think I'm deep down, I didn't want to admit to myself that I wasn't at that level, but I had this sense of confirmation in a good way. And here I am in arguably, one of the most important places for the game to have this revelation.
Sure.
I mean, hey, it's meant to be.
Absolutely. So that's just phenomenal. So you played the British Am. Did you end up making match play?
No, I fired 78 the second round.
Okay.
And if I needed any other confirmation after the 62 revelation, the 78 confirmed it.
There you go. So now was your 78 on Jubilee or was it on the old?
It was on I think it was on Jubilee. And the weather, the second day when I shot the 78, we were actually pulled off the golf course. The argument was, the RNA never stops play. That is not true. Okay.
No, they stopped in the Open Championship in
sure.
Yeah, in 15.
And they'll play in anything. Yeah, you can play in the worst weather over there, no question. But even as hard as those greens are, if there's enough rain, it pools everywhere. So it doesn't matter. And I had never played in conditions like that.
So you and the British Amateur, and at this time you're looking to obviously, you just said to yourself, I need to get a job. But before we get into what you're doing now, which is, as you said, you own a barbecue restaurant here in South Florida called Smoke, and you've been involved with other restaurants previously. So tell me a little bit how you kind of got into that realm briefly.
So Ben, what happened was when I decided that, hey, you know what, golf's not going to work, I had interned, for a couple summers at Ernst & Young. So I went there and I was an auditor in the real estate practice for a couple years and had an opportunity to transition into their group that was working with private equity firms, specifically in mergers and acquisitions. Okay. That, afforded me a luxury to kind of travel all over the world. And I ended up lastly in Dubai, and I was basically burned out. Look, I was home 75 nights in like 3 years.
Wow.
And I had gotten married in between that. And it just, as much as I was enjoying what I was doing, I missed being at home. I missed playing golf a lot. I had, I didn't have a lot of time. And although I did get to play some great golf courses, I've played all over the Middle East and some very unusual places, but I decided to quit. And with the support of my wife and a lifelong friend, Steve Chin, he was a very successful entrepreneur, and he said, come and work with me, and, we'll do something together. And as I mentioned, he had a passion for golf, and I had a dear friend who was a teaching pro up in New York, just outside of the city, at a club called Glen Oaks, spectacular place. He told me about a fellow named Marius who was this, quote unquote putting guru. And, I got a hold of Marius and I went and spoke with him and listened to his story. And he just had the most ridiculous story. He was this research scientist, and he was studying the yips and the impact of the yips on surgeons. And then sometime in the 80s, he got hooked up with Bernhard Langer, who was struggling at that time with his putting. And Marius ended up transitioning into golf because he saw the correlation, and, he thought it was fascinating. A lot of his input had significant influence on this, the SAM putting lab.
Of course.
And then he released a product called the Tommy system. Marius had come to the U.S. Interestingly enough, he had the opportunity to go and do continuous research with Dave Peltz or Hank Haney. And he ended up going to Texas, to Dallas, or just outside Dallas, with Hank Haney, because at the time Tiger was working with Hank. So, Marius knew that he would have an opportunity to research and kind of get an idea of what was making this guy tick. Well, Marius never had representation, and he was kind of a one-off. He did his own thing, and I said to Marius, look, you've got a lot of great information. Let's collect it up. Let's repackage it so that it's easier for the average person. I mean, here's a guy who had hundreds of thousands of putting strokes of some of the greatest players of all time, all the way down through, the average 20 handicap. And he wasn't doing anything with it.
So he was just stockpiling data and had just had nothing. So he had just no way to get it out. Okay, gotcha.
So the long and the short of it is we came to an agreement. And with the help of Steve Chin, we ended up shooting a putting DVD called Automatic Putting, and it was under the Marius Golf brand. And it was obviously nothing like anything I'd done before. I certainly had never been in any sort of production or development or marketing of a product. It was a huge learning curve. It was to say it was successful is, look, there isn't a second one, so I don't want to say that it was wildly successful, but it certainly wasn't a disappointment either. We tried to improve players' putting, and I think we were successful in that. So, Stephen and I did this project together. We had a great time. We went out on tour. We shot all these different things, and we traveled, and we decided, we're gonna continue doing ventures together, and we had talked not a lot, I might add, but one night after a couple cocktails, we were like, you ever wanted to own a nightclub? And is what Steve broached to me, and I was like, no, not really, but he's like, well, I think we should buy a place. And look, I'm young and dumb. I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And we did, and we bought a Mexican restaurant called Caliente Kitchen. We bought the lease, and we lost so much money in the first year. I mean, it was, just think about my poor wife. I had a steady paycheck. I'm over, building a career in Dubai and whatnot. And then the next thing I know is I tell her, hey, I'm quitting and I'm going to shoot a golf DVD. And then 2 years later, hey, I own a nightclub now.
I mean, it all makes sense to me, but I'm single with no kids and I have no responsibilities other than making sure this podcast goes out every week. So it sounds great to me, but I would imagine your wife probably had some concern. Concern.
If you thought she was mad when I left Dubai, she was furious when we bought the nightclub.
Nice.
And so the nightclub provided this opportunity, and it was an opportunity to look into this industry, and not necessarily just the alcohol component, but it was really more the food component. As I mentioned before, when I worked with Ernst & Young, I worked with private equity, and I was in Fort Worth, Texas for a couple of years with TPG, which is Texas Pacific Group. When I was in Texas, barbecue was king there.
It's bigger there. It's bigger there than in Canada. I mean, I'm just telling
barely.
you. Barely.
Not much bigger.
Okay.
I mean, there's not much better than smoked bear and smoked deer.
I mean, the burgers are the size of hockey pucks. You understand that, right?
So I fell in love with it. I loved the communal nature of it. It was something that appealed to everybody. Obviously, if you're not vegan, but it
weirdos.
Young, old, it didn't matter. People like barbecue. And, we were doing, we had the nightclub and we had it for approximately 3 years and we had a few years left on our lease and we made the decision to transition it to a place called Smoke Barbecue. And we opened it approximately, I believe it was 2014. And it was very well received. We brought a pit master down from a well-known barbecue place called Oklahoma Joe's, and he put together the first menu and how we were going to direct things. And it sounds like a weird transition, but really, back when I was in Texas, I knew that I was going to be in that business at some point. Because much like the golf, maybe it's OCD, I don't know what it is. But when I make the decision that I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And it may not, I've never been afraid to fail because Lord knows my golf game has been more about failure than it has success.
Well, that goes with everyone's golf game, to be honest with you. So.
Yeah, exactly. But this, smoke is the most rewarding thing I've done from a career standpoint. I feel very, very blessed that, again, my wife has always had a good career. We don't have any kids. So there's a lot less stress so that if you do have failures, which truthfully you're probably going to when you're starting a business,
sure,
or at least some slip-ups.
Sounds like your no-fear attitude in business translates pretty well into how you play your golf with nothing to lose. Just go ahead and go for it.
Ben, I believe that I'm a better player now than I was in college, and I think it's in part a regular partner of mine. I played a tournament recently. It was a senior-junior tournament. The player I was playing with was very, very successful amateur in the state of Florida, Peter Wegman. And
I know Peter Wegman.
So Peter and I are playing an alternate shot format. And it was really one of the first times that I had really noticed this, but I kept leaving poor Peter 3-foot, 4-foot putts past the hole. And it dawned on me it was instinctual for me to hit the ball more than it was to roll the ball in the greens. I'm going to make it. That was my thought. If I didn't make it, probably wasn't going to creep by, and, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's how I played. And poor Peter, I probably knocked a year off his life having to make all of those, which he did. But yeah, there is a translation. I think that's partly why I'm enjoying the game more and more. And, I had several years where I didn't play. And it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because I was focusing on the business. And
sure.
having joined Grand Oaks and getting back into it now is because I miss the competitiveness. I miss being around the guys on the range. I miss I want that urge of having a chance to win a tournament or being in that, at least in the game,
Sure.
coming down. And the adrenaline to me is as addictive as any drug.
So last year you ended up at the this U.S. Amateur Four-Ball at Pinehurst, but not just. I mean, qualifying for USGA is exceptional, no matter where it is and when it is and whatever it is, whether it's a US Am or the Mid Am. But you're at the US Am Four-Ball at Pinehurst. Now, what was so special about that?
Well, for me, the obvious assumption would be, well, it's my first USGA event. But the irony of it was that the event was 10 years. The start of the tournament was 10 years to the day in which I got married at Pinehurst. So my wife and I literally went back to Pinehurst on our 10th anniversary to celebrate the anniversary. And much to her chagrin,
you might as well
I
play
also
golf.
had a golf tournament.
Might as well play. That's brilliant, dude. That is brilliant.
Right?
Man, you are just winning with the whole marriage thing. I mean, just
yeah. Oh no, I know. She is literally the most patient woman in the world. God bless her. Because
what'd you get her for the anniversary present? I think is Caddy Bib 10-year anniversary, or is that what that is?
Yeah, it's Caddy Bib Sand Wedge.
Yeah, there you go.
So
okay.
yeah.
So 10-year anniversary at Pinehurst. Sorry, sweetheart. Go get a facial. Go to the spa. I got golf to play. How was that? How was that experience playing the U.S. Four-Ball?
Look, it's amazing because and I've listened to some of the other podcasts and the players talk about.
There's other what?
Your podcast.
Oh,
your
okay.
other interviews.
Yeah, I got
I'm
nervous.
Sorry.
I thought I was the only one doing this. All right, go ahead.
Stephen Anderson, I believe it was Doug Snope.
Yeah.
Talking about their USGA experience. Look, there's nothing better than it. I've had the pleasure of playing in, Canadian AMs, Canadian Mid-Ams, obviously the British Amateur. That was a very unique experience because of the place and the time. But to play your first USGA event at a place like Pinehurst, it's incredible. I mean, what more can you ask? And here I am. I'm paired with, a lifelong friend who was a groomsman in my wedding 10 years to that day.
Wow.
And, look, we missed the cut by 3 shots, 2 shots. It didn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
We went out, we played our best. You make a couple extra putts, you're in. If you don't, you're not.
Yeah.
But you're just taking in the experience. The USGA does just a phenomenal job in creating a professional event experience for amateurs. I had feared as I was getting older and hadn't been playing that I may never get that opportunity to play in the USGA event. And there has been, there's been some mutterings, and I've talked to some very good players who don't feel that a 4-ball format is a good format for a national championship. And I would disagree. I mean, look, the object in holding a national championship is for, to identify the best team at that time, and albeit, the one downfall to the 4-ball is because it's a spring tournament, the qualifying can be, 5-6 months in advance of the tournament.
Yeah.
You can look at it as a negative, but you can also look at it as a positive. If the team qualifies and they do not play their best, well, they weren't intended to win. They weren't the best team at the event. And so be it okay, well, look, we're not pros. And I may never see another USGA event. I'd hate to say that that's the case, but who knows? They're very difficult to qualify for. I know, Ben, you've played 2 U.S. Mid-Ams?
I got one. I got a 2012 U.S. Mid-Am, and you're 100% right. It's an amazing experience. And my opinion on the U.S. Four-Ball and about the, the qualifying times and whether it's fair or unfair, hey, it's the USGA. The winner of the U.S. Four-Ball is the one that wins the tournament at that time of the year. The
Agreed.
qualifier is a separate tournament. If you win that tournament, or you top 2, top 3, whatever it is, you got to win this tournament to get to play in the other one. They're two separate things.
Agreed.
That's my feeling on it.
And qualifying in its own right is, I mean, the spot that we qualified at was in Naples, Florida, and you could look down that list, and you have
studs.
So many FSGA champions. You have stud high schoolers who are going to become D1s. You have current college players. You've earned your spot if you finish in that top 2 or top 3 or win it. So, it's just, you just got to take it in, because you don't know if you're ever going to get to see it again.
Absolutely.
And when you talk to guys who have played in, multiple USGA events, it's a feather in their cap, and it really has to be, regardless of the success at the event, to get through to the event is a major accomplishment.
Absolutely.
Especially when you talk about multiple times.
Oh yeah, those guys are, yes. There's people that are in double digits, and they're aliens. So that's just ridiculous. So before we get to a couple of final questions, just want to ask you, so what are your plans for this year? Are you playing a lot of tournaments? Are you looking for more business? You have more business plans? What's your year looking like?
As far as golf goes, I plan to play as many FSGA events as I can, both 2-man and individually. I have been very blessed to have the opportunity to play some of the, cocktail circuit events, probably go to Birmingham National or the Birmingham Invitational, and maybe up to Oak Hill or whatnot. But truthfully, what I would like to do this year is to play as much as I can locally, get into a position to win, whether you win or you don't win, but be competitive. I'd love to play in the Florida Cup team in the fall. That's, it's just it may sound like a small goal, but for me, it's, this is why you hit, a few extra balls, or you spend an extra hour, putting and chipping, because, you want the opportunity to compete at the highest level. So 2018 is going to be a very, very big year for me, both playing and with the business. And we just got to keep positive, and, I feel pretty comfortable that things have worked out so far.
Sounds like
and
it.
that
sounds like you just you roll the dice and you're doing pretty good. So, we'll definitely keep an eye on your golf progress, and also we'll have links to Smoke Barbecue in the show notes, so people can, if you're in South Florida and you want to get some good barbecue, we'll point them in that direction.
And now, time for a quick bucket.
We have a segment here at the Back of the Range Golf Podcast called the Quick Bucket. So some quick questions. We always ask our guests these, and sometimes they change, sometimes they don't. But first one I'm going to have for you is this. Jack Nicklaus, his victory in 1986 at the Masters, or a 5th green jacket for Tiger Woods? Which would be the bigger victory?
The biggest victory for the tour players would be Tiger's 5th, because it would just help the TV contract. Those boys are doing okay.
Take your business hat off and just be a damn golf fan and just answer the question.
Jack Nicklaus, no question.
Right.
I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah,
it's incredible, and it is good and as athletic and as strong as players are, to do that at 46. I mean, come on.
Yep.
This, not to be repeated.
Gotcha. All right, so here's another one for you. You can give a major championship to anyone in history, male or female, alive or dead. They could have no majors, 18 majors, 10 majors, doesn't matter. Who's getting a major championship?
Well, you're not going to know who it is, and I mentioned him earlier on the podcast and during our interview. Is this gentleman, John Kindred? He was a Canadian professional golfer. Played the tour a little bit, played the Canadian tour. And he was instrumental in giving me the opportunity to come to Florida. He loved the game more than anyone I've ever met. His playing career was limited as he was growing his family and whatnot. And I would love for him to be recognized as great a player as he was with a major.
Awesome. So since you are in the restaurant business, I'm going to give you the opportunity to jump in front of Sergio and set his menu for the Masters Champions Dinner, and it's going to be catered by Smoke Barbecue. What are you bringing to the Masters to serve at the Champions Dinner?
The answer is smoked pastrami.
Okay.
Smoked barbecue, it brines, cures, and smokes its own pastrami. It's unlike any other pastrami you'll eat. It's an homage to Montreal smoked meat and, traditional Jewish pastrami that you'd find in any New York deli. But I would put it up against anything that's in the market.
Fair enough. Well, Scott, you made it. I appreciate the time here at the back of the range, and we'll keep an eye on your golf this year, and hopefully you and I will get out and play soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ben.
Anybody else hungry now for a damn pastrami sandwich? Jeez. Thanks a lot. Well, seriously, thank you very much to Scott Kennedy for spending some time with us here. Go check out his restaurant, Smoke Barbecue, down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we will see you again next week for another episode of the Back of the Range Golf Podcast.